Welcome to the Chronological Christie podcast, in which a long-time Agatha Christie collector and her Christie novice husband discuss the works of the Queen of Crime in publication order. In the last episode on the Seven Dials mystery, we talked about our next episode being about Miss Marple's debut in Murder at the Vicarage, but after checking we realised that the Partners in Crime short story collection came first. So in this episode we will be taking a look at the first 5 stories in the Partners in Crime short story collection.
Welcome to the Chronological Christie podcast. We are your hosts,
Gillian Porter, a long-time Agatha Christie reader and collector,
and her husband, Alan Porter, who after almost 40 years of sharing a house with Agatha Christie books has decided he should read them.
We'll be tackling the books in UK publication order as detailed on the official Agatha Christie website and sharing our thoughts on each from the viewpoint of someone familiar with them
and someone reading them for the first time.
In this episode, we will be taking a look at the first 5 stories in the Partners in Crime short story collection. These are fun and parody many of the detectives of the time, a different one usually for each story. All of the short stories were published in 1924 in various magazines, including The Sketch, The Grand Magazine, and Holly Leaves, which was a Christmas edition. The full collection was published in the UK and in the US in 1929. As the collection includes a total of 17 stories, with some having TV adaptations, we will split the discussion over 3 episodes. In this episode, we will cover the first 5 stories, which is actually 8 chapters of the collection.
As regular listeners would know, at this point in the podcast, we normally talk about what was going on in the world and with Agatha during the year of publication. However, as this is the second book published in the UK in 1929, we've already covered those in the episode on the Seven Dials mystery. This is our regular spoiler warning that during our discussions we will be diving into plot and character details as well as talking about who done it and why. And with that said, let's dive into the Partners in Crime. A slight change in format for this one as we will be covering multiple stories. So as we did with the Poirot short stories, for each story we'll have a synopsis, the story discussion, and then a discussion of the adaptation. Which I guess brings us to our first story, A Fairy in the Flat, and over to Jill for his synopsis.
Prudence Tuppence Beresford, who is happily married to Tommy for 6 years, is bored with life. Mr. Carter asks them to take over the International Detective Agency. The agency's manager, Theodore Blunt, is in prison. Carter asks that they watch for letters on blue paper sent to Mr. Blunt from a purported ham merchant anxious to trace his refugee wife. Each letter will have a Russian stamp, the number 16 written underneath. He asks for such letters to be sent to him immediately.
I thought this was actually a nice short introduction that sets up the next stage of Tommy and Tuppence's story in a light-hearted manner, while doing a good job of resetting their relationship and reintroducing the supporting cast of Arthur and Mr. Carter, the head of the Secret Service. All that plus establishing the detective agency premise and Tommy's underlying ongoing Secret Service mission for the stories to follow, as well as having some fun at the expense of Arthur Conan Doyle and his fairy obsession from a few years earlier. And Holmes as well, all in just 7 pages. There was a lot in there. That was impressive what she managed to get in just a short amount of text. What did you think, Joe?
I'm not sure I could add too much to that. You covered it all. It was very impressive. Just the details she got into those 7 pages. It picked it right back up with the same light-hearted banter of the secret adversary, which we really loved. I mean, not much more to say. It's a great little setup. No adaptation on its own, as it's folded into the Affair of the Pink Pearl episode at the beginning of the first episode of the Partners in Crime series.
Which moves us on to the second story in the collection, A Pot of Tea. Quick synopsis of that. Tommy's alias is Mr. Blunt, while Tuppence is his confidential secretary, Miss Robinson. The porter from their flat, Albert, has become their office worker, and while they refuse to take any divorce cases, they still need a case. And one day a man walks in asking them to find his girlfriend who no longer seems to work at the same place. It's a setup where Tuppence knows the girl and an easy way for them to get publicity, but also push the man to propose to his girlfriend. Landing that first client is always a difficult part of starting any new business, and Tuppence's solution is an ingenious one. playing matchmaker for a friend at the hat shop, while also using the girl's lovelorn, well-connected suitor as a way to drum up some word-of-mouth publicity, I thought was very clever. Although actually, thinking about it afterwards, I did think from a certain perspective it was actually a little cruel to the guy.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, a bit harsh.
Yeah. But again, very well written, establishing tale that sets up the workings of their new detective agency in, again, just a few short pages, 8 this time. So other than it being a bit harsh, what else did you think of this episode?
I think you summed it up beautifully again. I think it's impressive how much can be covered in just 8 pages of a short story. Some writers can't even get to the one point in that short of a time. Hoping Tuppence's buying hats continues. I do like that ongoing joke about how many hats she has, and that Tommy thinks they all look the same when they're actually different. I love that they get that over, that he's confused about how these hats can all be different. I did enjoy that. Again, no adaptation of its own, as it is folded into the affair of the Pink Pearl.
Just going back to the hats thing, I think there's several things that were set up in these first 2 stories that I hope carry on throughout. Things around the way that the agency runs. Albert's obsession with movies, as you said, the hats and the detective stories and stuff. I hope she keeps that going through the rest of the collection.
I agree, and I think what comes across in just these 2 short stories again is that the light-hearted touch she had with a story that brings these 3 characters to life in your head, and they kind of make you feel happy because they're so jaunty, I guess is a good word for it. I don't know, I just think they're just lovely and fun.
Yeah, very much so. They're a nice change from the sort of Poirot, Miss Marple, murder mystery type stuff.
Yes.
Nice light adventure stories. Talking of which, let's move on to the next one, which is The Affair of the Pink Pearl.
Tommy and Tuppence are approached by a distraught Beatrice Kingston Bruce and her mother. A precious pink pearl has been stolen from their house guest, Lady Laura Barton. Tommy investigates in the guise of Sir John Evelyn Thorndyke, the great medico-legal detective created by R. Austin Freeman, who just happens to possess an incomparable intellect, a vast knowledge of a number of subjects, and dashing good luck.
Is that me?
Yeah, that's you.
Incomparable intellect, vast knowledge of a number of subjects.
It doesn't say useless, though.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't say number of useless
Oh,
subjects.
okay, so I guess it's not me then. Okay.
But dashing good looks for sure.
All right. Let's stop the banter and move on to talking about the story. I must admit, I was unfamiliar with the character of Dr. Thorndyke that Tommy references and uses as a model for this tale, but that really didn't detract from my enjoyment of the story, which again is another positive thing, I think. Even though she's pastiching all these detectives throughout here, it doesn't really matter whether you know anything about them or not.
No, exactly.
This was a delightful missing jewellery mystery featuring engaging characters and some very unsubtle, thought-provoking social observations about snobbery and the impact of titles for anybody who's experienced British society and British culture. It certainly resonated. The overheard conversations and the misdirection I thought were very well done, as was the reveal of the jewel being hidden in the soap. And it was fun to see Tommy come out on top in this one in terms of deduction and reasoning. So I guess it's 1-1 in the Tommy and Tuppence match so far.
I guess so. Guess we'll have to see how it works out with the others, won't we? I thought this was a clever short story mystery. Like you, Alan, I thought it was nice to see that Tommy came out on top, keeps it even between them. I thought I had read a few Thorndyke mysteries, but after checking I was mistaken. It must have been another detective with a similar name. I shall have to rectify that soon, as it sounded interesting. I love the way she gives her characters just enough to make them come alive and not bore us too much with too much unnecessary detail that you're going to be like, oh, why did I just spend 5 paragraphs reading something that has absolutely nothing to do with the plot? I really appreciate that. I did enjoy how the side romance between the young girl of the house and a man her father did not approve of was noticed by Tuppence but not by Tommy. It was also very clever how this recommendation came from their previous client, showing that recommendations work well in this kind of world where they don't want fuck. And now we move on to the TV adaptation. This was from Agatha Christie's Partners in Crime. It was season 1, episode 1, and it covers the first 3 short stories in the book. I thought this was absolutely delightful. It kept all the charm and humour of the stories, and I really wish other adaptations took note. The removal of Agatha Christie's humour from some adaptations removes so much of her skill at creating great characters and stories with a light, humorous touch. I think some of the adaptations take themselves a little bit too serious and they end up sucking all the life out of them. I thought it was a pretty accurate adaptation. You could recognise the lines and the story from the book. Francesca Annis as Tuppence and James Warwick as Tommy are great together as a couple. They really spark off each other. And Rhys Dinsdale as Albert is wonderful. Like you talked about in the short story adaptations, Alan, that whole thing of him really throwing himself into the role of whichever movie he'd just seen and exasperating Tommy and Tuppence with it also brought a lovely bit of humour to the story. And I also thought, while it was easy to work out the parody of Sherlock Holmes, the parody of Thorndyke in the Pink Pearl investigation was rather hard to see unless you really knew your stuff. Curious why they changed Mr. Carter from the Secret Service to Superintendent Marriott from Scotland Yard, as that removed the whole looking for clues with blue notes, etc., which I quite liked. And I mean, they did add some characters in this one, but I think it made sense for an hour adaptation in the Pink Pearl part to have a few more people at the house. Kind of also went a little bit more into that snobbery thing as well, with, you know, the Americans being impressed by the title of Lady Laura Barton as well. What did you think, Alan?
Yeah, like you, I thought it was a wonderful adaptation. As Jill said, very faithful. Only a few minor alterations. Francesca Annis as Tuppence and James Warwick as Tommy are great together. They have a real on-screen chemistry. There were some nice light touches in their expressions, and I noticed, particularly in one area, some quick thinking on set too. James Warwick noticed a door sort of swinging open when it was meant to be shut and very surreptitiously sort of moved across the set and closed the door with one hand while delivering his lines, which I thought was quite good. The supporting cast was good too. And Tommy's discomfort at the rather forward and unsubtle Mrs. Betts was funny, while poor Lady Laura Barton was played to perfection by Dulcie Gray, with just the right amount, I thought, of pathos, sorrow and genteel bemusement. And the integration of the three stories into a single episode was actually seamless, really provided a great setup for the series to follow. I thought this was a good introductory piece for the what looks like it's going to be a fun series.
I agree. The only thing I will comment on, though, in the adaptation, I can't remember whether it was in the short story, is their friend that they'd set up in the pot of tea story. The gentleman is meant to propose, but he's still being thrown at other people, so obviously doesn't seem to be public knowledge that he's actually engaged.
We had that discussion while we were watching the adaptation. Then there was a line in it when he said,
I haven't popped the question yet.
So, and then it was like, well, I hope the other girl's worth it. And he's like, yes, she is. And so they did actually address it.
They did, but at the same time, Tuppence's ruse didn't work quite as quickly as she expected it to, is what I was, I suppose, trying to get at.
Yeah.
Right?
Before we move on to discussing the other stories, we want to take a quick break to tell you about our new Patreon account, where you can now get early access to our podcasts as well as our new Patreon-exclusive Agatha Adjacent podcast series. Patreon subscribers will also get the opportunity to submit questions for our bonus Q&A episodes. It's quick and easy to join our growing Patreon community, starting at the Greenway level for just $5 a month. Think about all that extra Agatha goodness for the price of a cup of coffee. And you can check it out at patreon.com/chronologicalchristie. Thanks to those folks who've already signed up, and thank you for your support.
Right, now we'll move on to the adventure of the sinister stranger.
A mysterious cigarette lighter, the first anticipated blue Russian letter, and a doctor dealing with Hope's callers. The detective agency spurs back into life as Tommy and Tuppence try to resolve these seemingly unrelated events. In this instance, the Berefords adopt the style and methods of Francis and Desmond, the Oakwood brothers, created by Valentine Williams, writing as Douglas Valentine. The Oakwood's methods typically involve Desmond getting into life-threatening scrapes only to be rescued by Francis, who turns up as the gardener or something in the nick of time. In this case, Tuppence unwittingly takes Francis's role. So what did you think of this story, Jill?
Well, I thought this story started more of the spy stuff that was intimated in the first episode, with Tommy receiving a blue note. As I'm unfamiliar with the detective duo in this one, I just sat back and enjoyed the show. Again, lots of fun. Tommy and Tuppence don't seem to take danger too seriously, but they know when they need help. Agatha Christie has such a light touch with describing people, and I could see the Russian thugs threatening Tommy. How about you?
Didn't expect the blue letter subplot that they set up in the first story to become the main focus of another story quite so soon. I thought we would get sort of more subtle mentions of it as it went on. So while this story seems to have a conclusion that wraps the blue note thing up, it seems a little early for that, so I'm assuming we'll see more of the blue letters, blue notes later on.
I'm not saying a word.
I wouldn't expect you to. As for the story itself, it seemed a little bit on the nose for me, this one. Supposed plan to get Tommy out of the office I thought was way obvious. The fact that the police inspector was a fake, I got right from the beginning. I was sort of mentally screaming at Tommy like, it's obvious he's not who he says he is. So I wasn't really invested in this one, probably because I was annoyed with Tommy. And because it had less interaction between Tommy and Tuppence. Tuppence was sort of off at the side for quite a bit of this one. It was more of a Tommy solo piece. And like I said, he was annoying me because he wasn't being observant. Like you, I've never heard of the Oakwood brothers, so I really can't comment on the pastiche aspect of the story. But I did enjoy it. And there's no TV adaptation of this one, which makes sense because they dropped the Blue Note subplot from the TV series.
Yes. While I agree with you somewhat, don't forget in The Secret Adversary, there were long periods when they were apart in that too.
Yeah, and I didn't like it then, if you recall.
Oh, that's very true. Did you? Yeah, I'd forgotten that. Sorry.
On to our next story, which was actually in 2 parts in the short story collection, entitled Finessing the King and the Gentleman Dressed in Newspaper.
Not even Tommy's trivia about the way newspapers are printed can distract Tuppence from her board. She wants to go dancing and is reading the paper in search of a party. That is, until she discovers a secret message in one of the articles. Just what does it mean to finesse the king? A personal advertisement written in code attracts the attention of Tuppence Beresford. When Tuppence suspects that the code involves the Three Arts Ball, she persuades Tommy to attend dressed in costume. Tuppence's suspicions prove to be correct when a murder takes place, but as all of the guests are dressed in masquerade, identifying the killer may be more difficult than first thought. In this short story, the detectives Tommy and Tuppence impersonate are McCarthy and Reardon, created by Isabel Ostrander. What did you think about this one, Alan?
I felt this one took a little while to get going, although the seemingly insignificant stuff about the newspapers at the front obviously paid off in the end. Of course it did, because it's Agatha Christie and everything's important, pretty much. But even if much wasn't happening, the banter still kept it a very enjoyable read. I did have to smile about the Ace of Spades club serving, quote, bohemian sort of stuff like bacon and eggs and Welsh rabbit, which is actually cheese on toast, though I remember it being pronounced and spelled as Welsh rarebit growing up, but whatever. It reminded me of the fish supper remark in Seven Dials. I guess the wealthy aristocrats of that era, the 20s and 30s, thought it was chic and daring to eat everyday working class food in sort of underground clubs. The fact that they sort of had to hide away the fact that they were eating fish and chips and bacon and eggs just cracks me up.
Oh, me too. The
reveal that it was the husband that committed the murder while wearing the same fancy dress outfit made from newspapers as his wife's lover was a little underwhelming, I thought. But him taking a dive out of the flat window at the end of the story was unexpected. Just a side note from me, I noticed towards the end of the story when they're in the flat, Tuppence says to somebody, Alice will make you a cup of tea. Who's Alice? Was that a typo? Was that meant to have been Albert?
Who knows?
Okay, no answer to that. So if anybody knows who Alice was meant to be, or if it was a typo, let us know. Again, I've no knowledge of the fictional detectives name-checked in this story, so it's difficult to pass judge on how skillful her pastiche is of them. But I will say, already I'm starting to learn more as every story results in me doing a Wikipedia search to look up who these detectives are, adding them to our wish list for future book hunts. Over to you, Jill. What did you think of this one?
I agree. I thought it had a slow start, as you said, but everything had a point to the story. Some points could be a little bit too on the nose, but then in a short story, there's really not too many places to put in a lot of red herrings. Tuppence's board is very dangerous and unpredictable, as we all know and love, but this time she had picked up on something that turned out to be more serious than either of them were expecting. The explanation of the dots on the paper was interesting just on its own, but used to clear an innocent man of murder, it was a very clever device. As you said, these clubs serving bohemian food sound very chic until you learn what the food was. Then they all seem to become rather staid, which is kind of funny, but they probably weren't, because they all seemed to be very busy and very jolly, didn't they? I felt they dealt with the murder very well, and although I'm not sure who the man in the newspaper was supposed to be from the Alice in Wonderland book, it was a good costume to use because it was easy to slip over another costume, and that was easier to imagine than what the costume was, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And like you've already been doing that research, I really need to do some research on the detective's reference so far.
This 2 stories combined was adapted and is Season 1, Episode 5 of Agatha Christie's Partner in Crime as Finessing the King. And what did you think of the adaptation, Jill?
I just can't understand why these aren't more popular. They are such fun. They take the crime seriously, but they're also a lot of fun. Well acted, well directed. They just kind of, to me, fizz off the screen.
I agree with you. This may be a controversial take, but at the moment I'm enjoying, and I know we've only watched a couple of episodes, plus the original Secret Adversary one. I'm enjoying these way more than I enjoyed the Poirot or the Marple ones.
You are allowed to have your own opinion.
So far, we'll see how it goes, but so far I'm really enjoying them.
You know, like we said before, Francesca Annis and James Warwick have such great chemistry. And Rhys Dinsdale as Albert is a hoot and a half, maybe. The clothes they wear and the sets are just spot on. The ball wasn't really part of the adaptation, but overall I thought the costumes we saw were really good. And I did like that it was a very short part, but a pivotal part, where the lover of the murdered lady is handed a note. I thought all that was done very cleverly. Apart from Lady Vere's costume, she was the murder victim. Her costume, Queen of Hearts, looked really cheap and stiff compared to others, I thought. I thought the man in the newspaper from Alice in Wonderland was an okay costume. It wasn't fabulous, it wasn't one of the best, it wasn't one of the worst.
But I was going to say, just want to interject on that, but they did actually put that line in there. It had only been thought of like a couple of days previously, and it was something they
could easily run up
very quickly over a couple of days. So it sort of, you understood why it looked the way it did.
You also noted he didn't make it.
No, he had somebody else made it.
Made the costume.
But it was something that could be put together in a couple of days.
Although in the adaptation, Sir Merville, Lady Vere's husband, takes off his costume and puts on this one, rather than the whole point, I felt, of how the costume was suggested, who suggested it, was easier to cover a costume. So that was interesting. But I did like how he covered his face as he joined his wife in the booth at the Ace of Spades, because otherwise she was going to recognise him. And by the time he'd stabbed her, it was too late. Whether she recognised him or not, it was too late by then. So I thought that was clever to see him going in doing this, so that, because she'd know who it was. And I also appreciated the change of detective to someone we already knew. That was fun. I also liked how they added some depth to Bingo Hale's character, who was set up to be the murderer, and managed not to belittle the fact that somebody had been murdered. I think some shows the murdered person and the body are just kind of over there, and then, we're going to go and have fun over here. And I thought that was very clever. And I just want to add into that, I just read the introduction to one of the murder mysteries collections written by Amor Towles. And if you haven't read it, I suggest, even if you don't read the short stories, you read it, because his homage to the cadaver in Murder Mysteries was wonderful. Anyway, Alan, what did you think of the adaptation?
I thought it was another fun adaptation. Like I said, I'm really enjoying this series so far, and not just because it's got Francesca Annis in it. I think it showcased the excellent repartee between Tommy and Tuppence, and between Tommy and Albert too. I thought the fun thing with the taxi fare, and him sort of borrowing money from Tommy for a taxi and then not taking the taxi and then denying that he'd ever actually been given any money for the taxi, was funny. As Jill said, overall the costumes were great, especially for the fancy dress ball scene. I thought Francesca Annis was a knockout in the tuxedo she wore as part of her Holmes costume. I thought that was actually a nice setup too, that we're going as Holmes and Watson, and of course when they walk in, she's Holmes and Tommy is Watson. I thought was neat, because he was clearly expecting it to be the other way around. I thought that was fun. Yeah, it was very faithful to the source material. They made some changes, but I felt they served the story. And I've talked about this before. I don't have problems with changes in adaptations as long as they serve the story and they're not just changes for change's sake. And I think here they did that well. Moving the discovery of the way that the newspapers marked their different editions to the end, I think made more sense and removed a lot of that blatant foreshadowing, I think, that slowed down the original short story. And as Jill said, actually including a scene with the suspected murderer, Captain Bingo Hale, fleshed him out to be a real character that you began to feel some empathy for, because in the short story, he's really little more than just a name on the page. You get to know really nothing about him. So I thought it was great that he actually got some screen time, and the interaction and the seriousness, as you said, with which Tommy and Tuppence were talking to him and started to feel empathy for him and realise he was innocent, I thought was great. Other than the fact, again, we mentioned it while we were watching it, they kept talking about how, everything was in confidence and nobody else would know about it, but there was a policeman stood by the door who was listening to every word that was being said. It wasn't that confidential, but I think the way they played the final scene was excellent with Tuppence's voiceover. I'm not normally a big fan of voiceovers, but that worked exceptionally well. And then Sir Arthur Melville's reaction as he started to realise that he'd been discovered as the murderer. And I was really, really impressed by the way they actually focused in on Tommy and Tuppence's shocked reaction to him committing suicide in their flat by jumping out of the window. It really showed that the series can elegantly balance the light banter with the darker moments and the emotions of what they get involved in. I thought that was really well done at the end there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought that was really well done too.
Partners in Crime was also adapted for the radio as a 13-part radio serial broadcast on the BBC's London, Midland and Scottish Home Service from Monday 13th of April to Monday 13th of July 1953. God, the Home Service. Yeah. Such memories. The half-hour episodes starred Richard Attenborough as Tommy. Wow, and Sheila Sim as Tuppence. I'd love to see if those are around.
Right.
Yeah. Taking advantage of the fact that the actors were then starring in The Mousetrap, interestingly enough. And Oscar Quitac appeared in all the episodes as Albert. And again, if anybody knows where those are available, either online or whether there's something you can get on CD or tape or something, I'd love to listen to those at some point.
Me too. But at the same time, it's also kind of nice isn't the right word, but kind of feel that some things are just of their time and then they're gone. And add something magical almost, rather than now everything's always, you can watch it on repeat forever and ever. Something having a once-off and being done is kind of nice.
It is. A bit like that show we were watching about British TV shows that have disappeared.
Well, I mean, some of them sounded pretty terrible.
I know, but the thing that the guy was trying to get over is the fact that, as you said, some things are very much of the time and them not being around adds to the mystique.
Yeah, agreed.
And on that philosophical note, I think we're about done for this episode. So thanks for joining us for this episode of the Chronological Christie podcast. If you would like to leave a rating or a review on your favourite podcast platform, that would be great. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. If you would like to discuss any aspect of this episode, you can message us on the Chronological Christie Instagram account, a link for which will be in the show notes. Or you can find us on social media. Jill, where can you be found?
I can be found on the Chronological Christie Instagram, TikTok and Thread account, and my author TikTok under Gillian.
And I can be found on most social media platforms by searching for @AlanJPorter or via my author's website at alanjporter.com. If you want to keep up with our various writing projects, you can sign up for our free bi-weekly newsletter at alanjporter.substack.com.
The books discussed on this podcast can be found on a dedicated Chronological Christie section of our online bookstore at bookshop.org. The link will also be in the show notes. And talking of bookshop.org, it's also the place where you can buy our latest books online while still supporting your local independent bookstore. Check out my new novel, Trust Issues, a light romantic thriller that's getting great reviews, and Alan's collection of Victorian-era adventure short stories, Saloons, Jungles and City Street, featuring Wild Bill Hickok, Alan Quatermain and Sherlock Holmes. Please join us for our next episode where we will be discussing part 2 of the collection of short stories from Partners in Crime. We look forward to you joining us.
The music used in this episode was extracted from I'm Somebody's Somebody Now by the Joe Venuti Orchestra and is a public domain recording. The Chronological Christie podcast is a production of Megarin Entertainment, a division of 4J's Group, LLC.